I wanted to ask you about the cost of living crisis. I mean, do you feel that the government is doing enough? I know that there's been quite a lot of criticism that there's sort of a vacuum where a big policy should be.
Well, it is really big issue. I think the government is doing a lot that it doesn't get credit for. £21 billion of help already there. But nonetheless, these are very exceptional circumstances, and I'm sure they will come forward with yet more. But I think the fundamental concern that people have is not just what are we going to do now with these enormous gas and electricity bills, but what's going to happen in 2, 3, 4 years to my family finances. With inflation high, is that going to come down? With the growth in the economy not being as strong as it might. And I'm not saying that people necessarily go as far as I'm about to go now, but as a conservative, I worry because our fundamental promise to the country is that we will invest in good public services and try and lower taxes. And without growth, you know, it's not just the NHS and care system, but it's also defence, which in the wake of what Putin's doing needs some more money, and people want us to lighten the tax burden. All that becomes very difficult unless you're really motoring in terms of your growth.
And so how do you bring that growth up? I mean, you're not opposed to the national insurance rise to fund social care.
Well, I'm not, and I appreciate I'm probably in a big minority amongst my own parliamentary colleagues, but I think in the end it is honest with people to say that we are going to spend more on health and care over the years ahead. We have a tax-funded system. We will probably end up spending less in terms of an increase than people in private systems because the NHS has pretty good cost control. We pay lower prices for drugs than anywhere else in the world, for example. But people want to know that in the end, we are going to be able to afford really fantastic care. And so your question was, where's the growth going to come from? I think it will come from playing to our strengths, and they are in technology, life sciences, green industries, our brilliant universities. We are already the biggest tech hub in Europe. I think we can do a lot more. This is not an overnight thing, but if we could be the world's next Silicon Valley, I think that would be a tremendous asset for the UK, and I think we could be. And
in terms of that money that's being raised from that tax rise, I've spoken to people within the NHS who say, well, that's never going to be enough. And I wonder whether you think that money could end up being wasted, not because of inefficiency, because like you say, that it's an efficient system, but because it's not going necessarily towards the right things. There's not really a plan for recruitment. I know we've been talking about that at length in this interview.
Well, my concern is that, and this is the biggest single thing I learned actually as health secretary, is that you can put 3 billion quid extra into the NHS, but if you haven't got 3 billion quid's worth of extra doctors and nurses to spend it on, the risk you have is that extra money will just inflate the salaries of the doctors and nurses you have, mainly through locum pay rates. And so the trick, the only way that you're actually going to increase the amount of care we deliver is by increasing the capacity of the system. And that capacity is not elastic. We used to think it was, because whenever we needed more doctors and nurses, we just imported them from overseas. I think we're reassessing that now. There's a global shortage of 2.1 million doctors, according to the WHO, 15 million nurses. We're not the only people with a COVID backlog. Other countries need their doctors and nurses too. But also I think we have to ask ourselves the ethics of recruiting, doctors from countries like Somalia, which desperately need them themselves. The doctors we get from those countries do a brilliant job, and we should always want to have international exchange, but we shouldn't be pillaging the health systems of much poorer countries.